District Digital Creatives Live, brought to you by Blackmagic Design, leading the creative video revolution. Flanders Scientific, reference displays and advanced color management devices. Adobe, everything you need to design and deliver exceptional digital experiences.
Awesome.
OWC Digital, the speed to create, the capacity to dream.
That's great.
Yeah, I'm watching the intro on my phone right now.
Telestream Wirecast,
I can't see
live
anything
streaming
on my
video
phone.
production software
So,
for Mac
forget
or
my phone.
PC. Premium beat.
I know.
Simple
Forget my
licensing,
phone. That's
extraordinary
it. I'm just
music.
going to look at the camera.
New Blue
Hi,
FX
guys.
Title Live 3 broadcast. Create
sorry,
network-worthy
you can
productions
hear me.
with a bootstrapper
Just
budget.
delay my last.
And Wowza Streaming Cloud. Endless live streaming possibilities.
Hey, what's going on, Internet? This is George from District Digital Creatives. Sorry about the late start. Had to work out a little bit of bugs that's gone at the moment. Tonight, I'm really excited to have Luisa and Ed on. So we're going to have a little bit of fun. Bring your questions. Luisa and Ed will have answers. Luisa, Ed, welcome. You guys are live.
Awesome. Thank you.
George, thanks for having us.
Yeah, thank you. Appreciate that. Hi, everybody.
Yeah, hey everyone. Greetings.
So, guys, part 107, drones.
Right.
What are we going to talk about tonight?
Well, it depends on what the viewers wanna see. But let's just say that a lot of people are a little confused about what the Part 107 really is and when it is required. So I just want to add in here that it is the intent of the flight that determines the need of a Part 107. So if you're flying as a hobbyist and you happen to take a killer shot of something, right, you can sell it without violating anything, any regulations, because you never intended to make money or any kind of profit with your flight.
Yeah.
So,
yeah, I'm glad you brought that up, Luisa, because, in my experience, that does tend to be one of the more common hangups that a lot of people that are planning to earn their 107 or new 107s kind of get hung up on. They wonder, I have my 107. Can I still fly recreationally?
Right.
Or vice versa.
Right.
If I have one, can I still do the other? And the answer is yes. The answer is you can
Absolutely.
fly recreationally or you can fly commercially, regardless of what your credentials are.
Right.
Really what it comes down to is what your intent is when you actually fire up the drone, wherever it is that you're at.
Right. So definitely the intent of the flight. So you need to check with yourself if you really want to make any kind of profit with your flight or not. So having said that, the Part 107, in case you guys didn't know, it's coming up for renewal soon. So if you got it 2 years ago, it lasts 24 months. So the FAA likes to do things by the month. And so August 2016, August 2018. So from some of the posts that I've been seeing online, some people have already taken the recertification test. So I believe it is available and it's very similar to the test that you had to take 2 years ago. Of course, if you took your first 107 just last month, then, you still have 23 months in which your certification is valid.
So Ed, you're certified. Are you a drone pilot, or you're a pilot? You're not certified to fly like planes. You're just 107 certified and also a trainer.
Currently, just I am certified at Part 107. But currently, I only pilot unmanned aircraft. It is a lifelong dream of mine. Eventually, at some point in time, to hopefully, be able to progress and learn about manned aircraft. But right now, pretty much just different types of UAV, is pretty much what I specialize in currently.
Okay, Luisa, how about you? You are a certified pilot. You're just a badass. I wonder if I could use that in the air. So you're actual certified pilot to fly planes. You're also a trainer and 107 certified.
Right. So I am what is called a Part 61 pilot, which means I fly manned aircraft. And just so that you know, for the FAA, unmanned aircraft, they're also pilots. So Ed is indeed a pilot as well. He just happens to not be aboard the aircraft. So when I'm flying my Cessna, I am a Part 61 pilot. And when I'm flying either my H520 unique drone or my Inspire drone, DJI, I am indeed a Part 107 certified pilot. I go over slightly different rules than the non-Part 61 pilots, meaning I don't have to take the test because I am current in my flight certification for the Part 61.
So how long did that process take for you to be able to, I kind of know your history a little bit about going from being a drone pilot to
Right.
actually being a licensed pilot. What was
Right.
that process like?
Well, I approached my local airport. I was lucky enough that I have a really good airport. It's Freeway Airport in Bowie, Maryland. So I approached them for lessons. And I can't really believe how lucky I've been in my aviation life. My instructor is Rodney Hoover, who is a great CFI, and I've been with him throughout. So I started my lessons in May 4 years ago. And in November, I was already a certified pilot. So it took about, 5-6 months to go through that process.
So Ed, I should say, Luisa, you're in the DC area.
Yes.
Ed, you're in Philadelphia.
Yep. I live in most of my flying takes place in the Philadelphia area, Center City area, a little bit outside the Center City area. Do a little bit of work outside of Pennsylvania, but the majority of my piloting takes place in the Philadelphia metropolitan area.
Let me just say, dude, I'm very jealous of you in the sense that I could step on my back door and try to take off with my drone and it just falls to the ground. You're in Philly, and what is that like? Because for those of you that follow you on Instagram, I mean, it's pretty crazy of the scenery, the image that you were able to get. Why don't you tell us a little bit about that process? Well, Philadelphia,
it's really a blessing where I'm located because the airspace in Philadelphia, which we were talking about 107 before. Part of the 107 process is learning how to evaluate airspace, and without getting too into the weeds, where you can and cannot fly without certain restrictions. But Philadelphia, a large portion of the Philadelphia area is technically, it's fair game in terms of legal flying as long as you fly within the standard regulations and standard rules that everyone really needs to follow. It can be pretty complicated at times in terms of maintaining safety. It's a complex environment flying in a city where there's a lot of variables. Your situation is constantly changing. But as long as in my experience, as long as you formulate a plan before you take off and you're constantly aware of your surroundings, you're able to get some pretty amazing imagery. And really stay within the bounds of doing it legally within being a Part 107 pilot.
Right.
So Luisa, how about you? You have a pretty unique area that you're able to, I'm not going to disclose where you are, but you're able to fly anytime you want to. How often and obviously, the last time I flew is when we were at NAB, so I would call myself pretty rusty right now. How often do folks need to get out? I mean, obviously, if you're a certified pilot, if you're not practicing, how often do we need to get out and make sure we're still good to go?
Right. So this is for anybody. I mean, just because I am a Part 61 pilot doesn't exempt me from having to do this. I actually practice as often as I can. So last week and the week before, the weather was a little crummy. It didn't let me go out too much and fly. But I have to say I practice about 3 to 4 times a week. And I am lucky enough that I can go into my backyard and just fly. And I am perfectly legal because I am in Gulf space. So Gulf space, for those of you who don't know, is space that is uncontrolled. So we can fly as long as we follow all of the other regulations, not just for Part 107, but for Part 101 or hobbyist aircraft. So I practice quite a bit. I practice my maneuvers. So I practice orbits, figure eights, following things, flying in a straight line with and without GPS, because it really does keep me in my toes. And just so that you know, I am very near Washington, D.C., but I am not in the freeze zone. I am inside of what is called the SFRA or SIFRA, or Special Flight Rules Area, and it is perfectly legal for us to fly in there.
Ed, what's your process, bro?
Me, I fly a lot, and Luisa and I have talked about this previously in the past, and one of the things that I think is really important to new pilots is that you really have to enjoy what you're doing. This is an exciting industry, but in order to really make something successful of yourself, you need to really enjoy what you're doing and enjoy the grind that it takes to become a good pilot, because I personally enjoy that grind, but I don't necessarily see that as a negative thing. But I fly every single day, weather permitting. I have a small messenger bag, and if I'm not doing anything UAV related, I always have a small drone with me. Even if it's only 15 minutes, I get in some stick time every single day, regardless, just to keep my thumbs fresh, keep my muscle memory, in tip-top shape, so that if and when I do have a contract that I'm working on, there's no lag. I pick up my drone and it's intuitive. What I think is going to happen just happens. There's no thought process when I go to work on an actual job. I fire up the drone, I do my checklist, and I make sure everything's safe and ready to go. And the drone goes into the air, and it's basically just an extension of my body at that point, because I fly so frequently that, it's really, I'm able to kind of predict where the drone is going to go without actually thinking about what my hands are doing on my remote control, if that makes any sense.
Right.
So, Luisa, I find that you guys preach a lot about muscle memory. What is that about? I mean, I know what it is, but as far as in the world of drones,
Yeah.
why do you need to focus so much on muscle memory? I know that's something that you preach to me all the time when I'm flying. Muscle memory.
Right. It's so that your conscious mind doesn't need to think about it. So basically, you want to do something, a maneuver, or maybe you ran into a precarious or emergency situation, and you can actually compensate for it immediately by instinct without having to think about it. And that only comes through practice, practice, practice.
Yeah. It's to take it one step further, Luisa is spot on. When things go wrong, and they do, you don't really have time to think and if you're flying in a complicated airspace, sometimes you need to react immediately, and a few seconds could be the difference between something bad happening and you salvaging a situation. Right. And I use the analogy when I speak to people of considering what we're doing along the lines of a musician that practices playing the guitar, and when you go to see a performance, you go to a concert, you see someone you like, they're not up there on stage thinking about which chords are going to be played next. They sit down, they tune up their guitar, and the song that they wrote, it comes out of them naturally, and it's just an intuitive process at that point, because they've practiced the chords so many times that they don't even think about chords at that point. It's just it's so intuitive that it's just part of their brain. It's hardwired into them.
Right.
So let's talk a little bit about. So we kind of went through the what you guys' thought processes on flying and so forth. Buying advice when folks are going out to buy a drone. Obviously, when I first got my first drone was a Spark, and right away I went out and bought, like a week later, I got a Mavic Pro. Obviously, for me personally, it was more of being able to go the distance with the Mavic Pro. Obviously we're inundated right now. DJI is kind of for the entry level drone, DJI is kind of owns the market, and we have to say that there's Unique, there's DJI, but for the small craft, DJI owns that market. What's your advice to people that's coming into the drone market and are looking for a new drone?
Right. So I'll get started the whole process here, and it really depends on what you're going to be doing. And just so that you know, DJI and Unique are not the only players in the market. There are Hotel drones that I have owned, and right now I'm very impressed by the Parrot drones. So, it really all depends on what you need to do. So, for example, if you are working, say, as a surveyor or working doing mapping and all of that, then most of these applications are going to work with DJI and Unique. So I am not aware of any of them that actually works with Parrot drones or whatever, right? So either that caliber drone or higher, right? But if all you're doing is getting cinematic or, maybe going for real estate, maybe going for even a search and rescue, non-thermal, I would seriously look at the Parrot drones. They are having a new one coming out called the Parrot Anafi that the demos that I have seen just look absolutely incredible. So, not to put out put down the DJI drones. Most of my drones are DJI. I also have Unique and I have Hotel. But I'm seriously looking at the Parrot drones as well. I mean, the market is constantly changing.
Yeah.
You're absolutely right. But, obviously, like you said, there's different folks out there that has drones, but obviously it all depends on what you're doing. Whether you're coming into it for the business or just a
Right.
hobbyist.
Yeah.
Luisa, I mean, obviously it's a huge explosion, but I think the limitation for some folks is just like in the DC area is not being able to fly. Like,
Right.
pretty much I have to come out your way to fly if I need to fly.
Yeah.
What what is the focus for the folks that want to do this for a living? What should they be focusing on? Ed, why don't you take that one?
Yeah, sure. It's a great question, and it's something that I think about a lot. And for people that really want to be serious about this, it sounds really simplistic, but you have to be good. And let me explain what I mean here. And it's, if you look at the statistics, the numbers change so frequently. I think there's something between, at current, about 3 or 4 million drones that are in the United States alone at this time, somewhere in that range. And that's a lot. And you figure, there are all these drone operators that are out there. Some of those people have multiple drones. Some of them are just recreational. Some of them are Part 107 commercial pilots. But there's so much competition out there, so many different operators, that you really need to set yourself apart from everyone else by really becoming a good pilot. Work on your skills. Like Luisa was saying before, practice your basic mechanics, orbits, straight lines, really, really basic stuff. Master that stuff. But it's not just the drone techniques. It's also, a lot of, me personally, I have a background in photography and videography. So I before I got into UAV, I knew a lot about composition and lighting and exposure and settings. And these are all things that, a lot of pilots, are getting into UAV because it's an exciting, interesting thing to them, but they don't have a skill set in photography or videography. And that those are just as important to piloting skills, because if you're an incredible pilot, but you don't know how to expose an image, you're still going to be creating a mediocre product for whomever your client is. So it's really, it's a yin and a yang, in my opinion, to pay attention to not only becoming a solid pilot, but also having a thorough understanding of, how light impacts a camera sensor, how to expose an image, how to plan, and with drones, you have to figure where the sun is in relation to the thing that you're shooting, to pay attention to shadows and highlights and exposure and overexposure and whatnot. There's really a lot to think about. But, to take it back to the beginning thing that I said, you really have to be good, because, there are so many people with drones nowadays that simply going up in the air and taking a picture from really high up, it doesn't really get it done anymore. You really need to advance your skills if you plan to become a professional in this industry.
I mean, I could definitely say, in your Facebook, not your Facebook, your Instagram feed, it definitely shows your commitment to what you're doing, at least in the Philly area, because you have that ability to go out and fly every day, and with no limitation. It definitely shows with your visuals from the Philly area. Luisa, so I kind of want to not piggyback a little bit on your process. Yours is a little bit different, not completely different. You're unique in the sense that you're a certified pilot of 5 planes. You're also a drone pilot. But Ed does the same thing too. But you guys kind of work in the commercial arena of drones also. Tell us a little bit about that. You work with safety, fire departments, police departments. Share with
Right.
us.
Right. So my company, which is called Patrium Shield, is actually a homeland security company, and we work very closely with firefighters, police, first responders in general. And we don't just do drones. Drones are part of it, and it's what I'm in charge of. But it's very exciting things because because of the kind of work that first responders do, they have to follow slightly, not different rules, but they have to pay attention to different things. For example, when there is a disaster, say in Texas last year or in Puerto Rico, because of the hurricanes, the drone pilots needed to ask for permission to fly because immediately those zones turn into no-fly zones. So there is a TRF or a restriction on the flight, and for anybody to fly, they need to get permission. Now the FAA, and kudos for them, they were giving permissions within 20 minutes. So whenever a drone was being used for first, search and rescue, first responder work, whether it was mapping or anything like that, they were getting the permissions really, really quickly. In the DC area is slightly different. So right now I'm under contract for several things inside of the no-fly zone in the DC area. And what that entitles is asking permission really from the TSA. And that's a very complicated process that my last proposal, just so that you know, was 62 pages long.
Whoa.
Right.
Oh, indeed.
Right. So just so that you know, I mean, it's a complicated process, but it's doable if you are within certain distance from a national airport. So you have to be greater than, I think it's 7 miles, nautical miles. Mm-hmm.
So where does the industry go from here? I mean, obviously, we could go on and on about the whole
Right.
business of drones, but where is the industry going from here? Obviously, we have your hobbyists, you have the folks in the middle, and then you have the folks that are. I mean, it is an explosion because cinema. It's really huge in the cinematographer industry right now. Obviously, before we used to use helicopters to do all of those crazy shots, but now we're still using those aircrafts to get it done. But drones are more prevalent right now in the cinematography industry and on movie sets because obviously a $5,000 drone, if it crashes, it's a loss, it's a write-off. But with a large craft, but you're able to do more now right now with a, let's say, Inspire or a Unique. Where does the industry go from here?
Well,
That's fine.
in my opinion, there's been a lot of advancement, an amazing amount of advancement, but it's amazing to me sometimes. There's still a lot of stigma hurdles that need to be. There needs to be more information given out to the general public. There's still a lot of fear of drones, despite the figure that I threw out there earlier about how many drones actually are out there. It's startling how much people still don't know about them. When I'm out, on an assignment, I take a lot of pride in sharing information with people. Some pilots handle situations differently, but I like to look at myself as someone that's progressing the industry. And a lot of times, flying in the city, people come up to me and they ask all different types of questions, ranging from general interest, thinking what I'm doing is cool, down to thinking that I'm a criminal that's spying on them. And, regardless of what the situation is, I try to keep an open mind, and I try to share knowledge with people. Because there's a lot of misconceptions that people have, and I think that there are great things, there are great advancements, and a lot of amazing things are being done. But I think that there also is work to be done in terms of spreading knowledge of those things to the general public. And I see it all the time. There are some negative stories, but there are a lot of positive stories that come out. I've been seeing more and more stuff in general mass media lately. Stories popping up in, the New York Times, Washington Post, different major media outlets sharing really positive things. And that's huge for the industry because, professionals using drones is amazing. Finding ways to improve industry, make people's lives safer, create awesome, cool content. Those things are all amazing. But at the same time, the perception of drones is also equally as important to continue that growth, in my opinion.
Luisa?
Right. So I'm going to agree with everything that Ed said, but I'm going to add a couple of things. For example, you can't open any magazine nowadays, and I'm not just talking industry magazines. I'm talking about Time magazine. I'm talking about, anything without seeing a story about drones. So where are drones going? Everywhere. They are here to stay. And eventually the public will get used to it and people will get educated. So I just had a meeting today with Carroll County Community College where they are starting right now, and that program that I helped create for a certification in drones. And we were talking about what other classes to include, where was the industry going and all of that. And there were so many choices that it was really hard to just say, okay, we're going to add a class in thermography. We're going to add a class on night flight. We're going to add a class on mapping. We're going to add a class on search and rescue. I mean, it was going literally everywhere. And that is where the industry is going. It's literally everywhere. I see drones that are going to be used in medicine. Yes, think combat medics. I see drones that are going to be used not just in search and rescue, but for mapping the entire United States so that if there is a disaster, we know where and when the levees will break because we'll have everything mapped through LiDAR.
Right.
So I am very, very positive and very optimistic on where the drones are going, right? Yeah. And my answer to that is a simple everywhere.
Well, like you said, I think it's really important from one that's from the Caribbean. Obviously, we still have rural areas, like you said, and that doesn't have necessary medical facilities. So it's going to be a good thing where you could be able to fly medical supplies, or even if someone is having a medical emergency and you don't have the proper medication or whatever the case may be, you'll be able to fly that out.
Right.
So definitely for the continent of Africa is going to be a big deal because obviously again getting medical supplies, at great distances, is going to be really important to the longevity. What's some of the developments that you've seen on? I want to focus on a little bit. I know we're kind of going on and on, but the medical side of it. What are some of the developments? Obviously, drones can only go a certain distance.
Right.
When I was in the Navy, we had drones. That's on a whole different level that are able to go, way for days.
Right.
How is the industry preparing to get to send drones out for days upon days that you really can't see, or you have to be able to control it over long distances? Are we there yet in the industry, Luisa?
So we are there for the bigger drones. I mean, the military, as you very well pointed out, has been doing this for decades. I mean, really, drones are not new. I mean, Marilyn Monroe was discovered because she was building drones. I mean, they were doing a promotional shoot, and the photographer saw this beautiful blonde just building drones, and that's how she was discovered. So you can think of how long ago that was and how long the drones have been with us. So just to be a little bit more specific, I think that we are now discussing solely the drones that really came into vogue 8-9 years ago. So the Phantom type, the Unique, that sort of thing, not necessarily the military ones. So limiting the drones to that type of drones, the ones that fall under Part 107, which is between 0.5 pounds and 55 pounds, so limiting the drones to that. Right now, what is limiting us to be able to fly what is called a BVLOS, so BVLOS, so beyond visual line of sight, is the technology. Once the technology is more advanced and there is a history that the FAA can look at and say, okay, of all the drones, we had 2 million drones and, X amount of accidents happen. So I think that statistically speaking, we can progress. That we'll be able to do more with beyond visual line of sight. The problem is that right now we don't have the statistics that go behind these flights. So for example, aviation is over 100 years old. Yeah. Cessnas have been flying for 70, 80, whatever. I don't know when they were first created, but they've been flying for many, many years. So there is a history. There is a history. DJI is what, 8, 9 years old?
Right.
There is no history. There is no data to extrapolate the information that not just the insurance companies need, but that the FAA needs to make educated decisions on what they can and cannot allow us to do. So right now, in my humble opinion, what we can do with them for medical things, as in delivering blood, a defibrillator, medicines, maybe a camera that can pinpoint who needs help, so they can start triage, is really dependent on visual line of sight or beyond visual line of sight. And we need more data for that. So only time will allow that.
Yeah. To play off that, Luisa, and speaking of like the developments of drone legislation, there's a lot of opinions that exist on, how the FAA is handling the developments of the UAV industry. And, some people are frustrated. Some people are, pleased. Some people are in between. It's easy to, be a person who feels any of those emotions. Me, myself, realistically, there have been times where I've been frustrated with the way that things are legislated. But when I take a step back and look at the short amount of time that this industry has existed, and like you just said, the lack of statistics that exist for many, many things, it actually feels like they're moving at an appropriate pace to me sometimes. Sometimes it feels slow, but when you look at the size of the volume of drones that have entered the NAS in the past, several years, I personally appreciate the approach of, starting with an onion and gradually peeling back the layers to make things more and more accessible to the civilian drone operator, despite it being admittedly frustrating sometimes.
Right. Agreed 100%. I think the FAA is doing a wonderful job. And just like you, sometimes I am very frustrated. But think about this. I mean, the Lance, it's going to be available nationwide very, very soon. So we'll be able to get permission to fly on Bravo space, on Charlie, Delta space in 20 minutes. What we thought would never come, right? So that's already a reality. And so, for years now, I've been comparing drones to when cars were invented. When cars were invented, there were no roads, we had cars and people were driving cars, but there wasn't that regulation of, you have to drive on the right side of the street. That didn't exist. That came later. So all of that chaos is what we are experiencing right now with the drone industry. And kudos to the FAA that is taking us very, very seriously, is treating us as the rest of the pilots, because, for some people, a real pilot is the one that actually flies only a manned aircraft. I disagree. I think a drone pilot is a real pilot. And they're treating us seriously. They are paying attention to us and our industry. And if sometimes they're not going as fast as we think they should go, it's because we are not looking at everything that they need to look at. So I advocate giving the FAA the benefit of the doubt, and let's be a little bit patient with them. I think they're doing a wonderful, wonderful job, and kudos to them.
Absolutely. Totally agree. 100%.
Like with any industry, right? I mean, there's gonna be some pushback. Obviously, I could understand where pilots' frustrations are. I mean, I always say to you, Luisa, to be able to become a true pilot. I don't want to say true pilot. To become a certified pilot, not a 107 pilot.
So Part
That's
61.
Kudos to you, right?
Thank you.
It's a lot of work, but we have folks flying around. I mean, including myself, but I don't live dangerously when I have a bird out, because I understand the ramifications, and if you crash it, and not only if you crash it into someone or something, that's going to cause a huge issue. I mean, what would you say to folks that's out there flying recklessly? I mean, obviously, we see we're in the forums, we see all the videos online of folks just flying their drones 10 miles when it's only have a range of 3 miles
Right.
and expect it to come back. I mean,
Right.
I would go into panic mode too. I think it's a little bit, reckless and crazy to take your drone out and you can't bring it back because you
Right.
don't know where it's line of sight. I mean, tell me a little bit, a little more about that line of sight. Why is this such a big deal to fly line of sight, be able to see a drone? Ed, any one
Uh,
of you?
Ed, you want to take that one, or you want me to?
Well, I mean, I think it's important that we both give our opinions on
Right.
this one because it's an important topic.
It really is.
Me personally, I fly predominantly in urban areas where there are a lot of variables, and my situation changes quickly. A lot of things can happen in an urban environment where obstacles and potentially dangerous hazards enter the environment that were not there when you began flying. And also, when you fly in an urban environment, you're also at a higher risk for different types of signal interference, video transmission drop, GPS drop. Without getting into all the reasons why any one of those things might happen, flying in an urban environment increases the opportunity for one of those things to happen. And when you're in an area where there are a lot of hazards, it goes back to what we were talking about before with muscle memory. You don't really have a lot of time to react. And if you can't see your drone and you're wasting time visually trying to locate where that drone is, say your video transmission drops out and you can't see on your monitor what it is that you're doing any longer, and your GPS drops out at the same time, and you're at the mercy of the wind, and you're staring up in the sky trying to find your drone, you could have something really bad happen. And from that perspective, it's a safety mechanism. You need to be prepared. You need to be able to be experienced enough where you can predict what the hazards are going to be before they present themselves, so that you have a fallback plan on how you're going to react to them if and when they do happen, because they do. Mm-hmm. And if you're wasting time trying to find where the drone is up in the air, then that's time where something bad could be happening. And I'm sure Luisa will agree with me.
Right.
It can be very hard to spot. If you take your, even if you know exactly where the drone is, if you take your eyes off of the drone for a few seconds, it can be difficult to spot it. So you really need to constantly be aware of where it is, because seconds matter.
Right. Agreed 100%. In fact, it's so important that my Mavic Pro, I actually bought a skin for it that is orange, so I can actually see it a little bit easier up in the sky. And, in aviation, there is something called situational awareness. And that means that you always need to know where you are, how fast you're going, the direction of your flight, how high you're flying, what the wind is doing, all of those things. And that's important because there's also something else called see and avoid. It is our responsibility as unmanned pilots or unmanned aircraft pilots to avoid all manned aircraft. So what I usually tell my students is, listen, I don't care whose fault it is, it's your fault. If you hit a plane, it's your fault. If the plane hits you, it's your fault. It's kind of like the egg and the rock, right? If the egg hits the rock, the egg breaks. And if the rock hits the egg breaks too. So no matter who's doing what, it is our responsibility by regulation, by the way. It's not just something I made up. It is our responsibility to see and avoid manned aircraft at all times, always. And there's no exceptions to that. Right. Remember, folks, there are people on that aircraft. If our drone falls and breaks into a million pieces, we are unharmed. They are not. Mm-hmm. So,
So let's talk a little bit about night flight. Obviously, we just talked about drones and line of sight. Night flight is a whole different ball game. Yeah. Luisa, give us the lowdown. Obviously, this is the FAA is not going to just give you that certification to go fly at night. What's that process like, and why is it so hard to be able to fly at night?
So according to the Part 107 regulations, you cannot fly at night. So you can fly during civil twilight, and civil twilight is the 30 minutes after official sunset and before official sunrise, right? So you can look, you can Google it, you can look at an almanac, whatever, because it varies. depending on the time of the year, right? So what time that is. So in order to fly at night, you have to have certain things that you need to comply with. The first one is you have to have a waiver. And because the regulations say that you can't do it. So you need a waiver to that regulation. And in order for the FAA to give you that waiver, nowadays you need training. So training is actually required, mandated. And this is a training that we've been providing for a while. And I'm always current in my manned aircraft night flight. There's a ton of illusions and all of that can happen, that can be very dangerous, that affect both unmanned and manned aircraft. But the most important thing, and what people need to know, is that please don't do it unless you have that waiver. This is on the Part 107. And if you're going to do it on the Part 101 or hobbyist, have anti-collision lights that are visible within 3 statute miles. And they sell those lights. There is not a single drone in the market today that has built-in lights that comply with that. So these lights can be solid or strobing. They have to be either white or red, and they have to be visible at 3 statute miles, by anyone. So if you follow those, whether you're Part 107 or Part 101 hobbyist, make sure that if you're on the Part 107 that you have the waiver. You really don't want to play around with this. And if you're flying as a hobbyist, make sure that you do have those anti-collision lights. And there's third-party manufacturers that make them, and you can just buy them and stick them to your drone, and we're good.
Yeah.
Right.
I'd like to jump in here and say anyone, Luisa just gave out an incredible amount of information right there. And anyone that is considering they have their 107 and they want to get their night waiver, rewind this and watch that over and over and over, because she just told you everything you need to know in terms of technical aspects and specific details, critical stuff that you need to include on your application. So rock on, Luisa. That was nice.
Thanks.
So we're getting down here to the end of the stream. So what do you want to share with folks out there for safety? I know you talked about anti-collision lights.
Right.
I don't have too much more to add to this conversation, but what do you guys want to share with the audience?
So I feel that I've been taking over and talking too much, Ed.
So Ed, let me just ask you. Okay, let me just ask Ed this. So, give me quickly, because obviously you're focused on. You do a lot of aerials in Philly, and not just aerials. You're purposely. It's everything that you do, and I see that you do is with purpose. Mm-hmm. What's that? What are you trying to accomplish? Obviously, it's part of Flying Bronco. Yeah. Give us a spill for your business and what you do and what's your process.
Yeah.
And where you're trying to go.
My organization that you mentioned is Flying Bronco. It's multifaceted. I provide education. I give seminars around the city. I've given lectures at University of Pennsylvania. Working with a couple different nonprofit organizations right now. Kind of like we were talking about earlier in this discussion. It's really important to me to get knowledge out to people that don't know anything about this industry. Basic knowledge, not complicated technical things about drones, but just giving people knowledge about what it is that we care about and why we care about it, and letting them learn more if they so choose to do so. But then, putting that to the side, I'm just very passionate about creative imagery. It's just something that I've always been interested in. I do non-UAV work quite extensively, and I usually try to incorporate UAV into my regular videography projects as much as I possibly can. But just making a situation look amazing is something that I'm very passionate about, and drones just help me do that better. And with respect to flying in the city, one thing that we didn't touch on yet that I think is an interesting thing for new pilots to think about is think about the position of the sun when you're flying. It can really creatively affect what it is that you're capturing. If you do not have too much background as a creative visual artist, think of the sun as your light for your scene that you're shooting. And if you shoot your subject, in this case with a drone, most likely might be a landscape or a building. Consider the position of the sun and the time of day that you're shooting, the sun can be a backlight or a side light or a fill light. And depending on, if you plan your shoots around the timing of the sun, you can create some pretty stunning visual effects on whatever it is your composition is that you're trying to create. And, that's one of the things that excites me most about UAV. There's amazing practical application. There are tremendous things that are being done that Luisa was talking about, humanitarian efforts, increasing, speed and safety in lots of different industries. But the creative aspect is really one of the things that I'm personally very passionate about, and that's pretty much what Flying Broncos mission is: the education and creative aerial imagery.
So Luisa, you're again, your situation, it's not different from Ed, but obviously you do a lot. Your After Effects is your passion.
Right.
How you have a lot of passions, I should say. You have the flying, you're a pilot, you have the After Effects, you're a trainer. How are you incorporating? How do you find time for creativity? I know it kind of sounds like a crazy question. How do you find time for
No,
creativity?
it's
Because obviously you're doing so much on the
right.
creative side. How do you
Right.
find time?
So it's a very good question, actually, and the answer is not easily, right? So I go through stages, right? So I go some months in which I just fly. So I am creative. I get my creative outlet, but not through video production or whatever. So as you may already know, my background is really as a musician. I am a classically trained violinist. And I played for many years professionally in the Washington, D.C. and Baltimore area. So the opera, the symphony, quartets, all of that, I did that for many years. And eventually I stopped doing it because my other passions kind of took over. So it's not necessarily, oh, you're no longer doing the creative part because I'm no longer playing music. It's just I'm doing the creative part in a different way. So, for example, video is an art that lives in time, a lot like music. You have rhythm, you have pacing, you have composition, you have balance, you have all of those things that I incorporate into my video production. Well, flying is not any different than that. There is feeling, there is rhythm. You have to feel when you're turning, whether it's manned aviation or unmanned aviation. There is a feeling that you have when you're flying under visual flight rules. And then there is a feeling on the instruments and interpreting the instruments that you see in front of you when you're flying under instrument flight rules, which I'm training for right now so that I can fly in the clouds, right? So what I'm trying to say is that I have my creative outlets. Sometimes they're video, sometimes they're music, sometimes they're flying, but they're always there. I feel a tremendous need to just express myself in whatever medium I happen to be working on at the moment.
So I'm gonna get ready to wrap up here, guys. So obviously, what is your trainers, both you and Ed? How are you guys giving back to the community? Obviously, Luisa, because you're closer to me here in DC, and I run District Digital Creatives. You're one of the folks that come through every so often. We just had Dave Emily, Duran from Adobe, and we had a good session. How are you guys giving back to the community? That's in your part. You come to my meetings and present. Ed, what are you doing in Philly? Do you do freebies?
Oh yeah, absolutely. It's it's something it's very important to me, and I do it all the time. Not as much as I would like sometimes because life gets in the way, work gets in the way. But I try to do at least a half a dozen free seminars per year. I work with a few different nonprofits in the Philadelphia area. I'm actually working with an organization right now in Philadelphia. It's called PhillyCam. It's a nonprofit public access television station based out of Center City, and I'm working with them on a presentation that I'm hopefully going to be doing later in August. It's free for the community. Just it's people that are creative professionals in the area that just want to know more about UAV, and I'll come in as a subject matter expert and just kind of talk about a topic that I design, and then we'll have an open forum Q&A at the end where people can, pick my brain and just get some information. But in answer to your question, it's very important to me. I try to give back as much as I can, and get people excited about the industry.
Right.
Luisa?
Right. So I feel exactly the same way throughout my career, whether I was doing music or video or After Effects composition or Photoshop or whatever, and now flying. I have had so many people help me out that I feel it is my duty to help others out. And besides, speaking for your group, I do other things. Right now, I'm very involved with Carroll County Community College. And they're starting this certification program for drones, and we're doing a bunch of events where obviously for free. I mean, obviously, right? Where we are training the public on the advantages of using drones, educating the public that, look, the drones are not your enemy. They're not spying on you. They're not, they are good for the community. They're good for you. Maybe you want to make this into a career. And we're doing everything into together with a community college environment in which training that I have given that would cost $20,000, $30,000, $40,000, they're doing it for just hundreds of dollars. And really reaching all layers of the community, of all social stratus. So I think that work is really, really important. And kudos to the community college, Carroll County, that they're doing that.
Well, I'm just going to add to this. Obviously, I run District Digital Creatives, and it's volunteer for me. I have a day job like you guys do, and I have to commend you guys. I know this week I feel like we were chasing each other, and I'm glad for you guys sticking with it. We were able to put this together. Obviously, I have to thank OWC, AutoWork Computing, Black Magic Design, Flanders Scientific, all the folks that contribute to DDC. Without their help, it's given back to the community. And DDC, definitely that's what we're doing with DDC. We just dropped a new site, and we're really gonna be doing some good things. At some point, we're gonna go fly in. Hopefully, Ed will make his way back down to DC area, and we'll go flying. For those who, if you're watching and you're in the DC area, and if you're not in the DC area, if New York, Philly, drive down, and we'll do a day out flying.
Right.
Let me do a couple of plugs while I have you guys here on screen. Definitely Black Magic Design going to be here in DC from the 16th to the 18th. They're doing a road tour, so definitely if you're in the DC area, check them out. The 17th, we have a really good event that night, so you want to come out and check that out. Editor's Retreat is happening in a couple of weeks also, so there's still time. I know I'm looking away from the screen, but I'm looking off here to a web browser. So Editor's Retreat in Philly is happening from the 25th to the 29th of July. If you're an editor, if you're a creative, definitely that's something you want to look at. You could find that information at editorsretreat.com or FMC Training. Again, support your community. If you're in the creative space, give back, because like anything else, we're not here forever. Knowledge is,
Right.
you could gain all the knowledge in the world, but without sharing it, what are you gonna get out of it, right? Any last thoughts from you guys?
No, none. Thank you for putting this. It's always a pleasure working with you. And of course, I've been to Philly a number of times to fly with Ed. He's a true artist, folks. I have nothing but good things to say. And I've learned a lot from both of you. So thank you.
Yeah.
But thanks,
likewise.
guys, for coming on. And I'm going to end the stream, but hold the line. I'm going to chat with you, do an after chat with you. This is District Digital Creative Live. Check out our website, districtcreative.org. If you're in the DC area, definitely sign up for the newsletter and join the community. Take it easy, and we'll see you next time.
Have a good night, everyone.
Bye.